Okay, spur of the moment stream tonight. I hadn't really planned on doing anything because I'm working on a stream tomorrow, music stream. I put a tremendous amount of work into it. I'm going to drink some uh, blue lemonade, psilocybe natalensis. No, I am not a member in good standing. No particular reason for that, I'll actually talk a little bit about that history because it's extremely relevant. Anyways, yeah, I wasn't planning on doing a stream tonight, so it's a little bit ramshackle. But I realized it was Friday the 13th, and every time there's a Friday the 13th, I usually do a Templar stream. And I'm sure most of you guys know, but just in case, the Templars were warrior monks, medieval, and the legend is that they were defending the Holy Grail, the Graal of God, right? The chalice that held the blood of Christ. They generally presented themselves as like very Christian, holy men, but probably not true. And they made a lot of references to never, for example, never revealing the secret of what their real agenda was, who they, hold on, let me leave the chat. Well, thank you for joining us, despite your tight schedule, my friend. Yeah, I can see your comment. So anyways, long story short, they were accused of worshiping a false idol. They were accused of worshiping a relic as well that some believe was the Shroud of Turin. And so they were arrested on Friday the 13th, 1307. An edict was issued by King Phillip the IV for their heads, right? And they did end up getting executed, Jacques de Molay and whatnot. But the interesting thing about this is that the Templars were magicians. In my opinion, they were a hermetic secret society. All of these secret societies are basically hermetic. And one of the most interesting parts of the story is that they were alchemists, right? And the real reason they got executed had nothing to do with heresy. Heresy? That's an excuse. The real reason is that they had the entire crowned heads of Europe in debt to them up to their eyeballs. Now, how did they do that? In 1983, I don't remember his name, but there was a laboratory, I think in the US. They were able to knock a proton off of mercury and make gold. And the misconception with, the common misconception is that alchemy is lead into gold. Lead is part of the process, but mercury is the substance that's actually transmuted. And that makes sense because mercury is the mediator, right? The Promethean conduit for the gold of higher consciousness, the philosopher's stone, right? And Mercury is the closest planet to the sun, which is wild because there's no way that whoever named the sun and Mercury knew that there was a correspondence in the elements, right? So this book here is called Morals and Dogma, and it was written by the Supreme Commander of the Southern Jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry in the United States. It was published in 1851, and among other things, we're actually going to read a little bit of it. He mentions in the book the process of transmuting mercury into gold, and it is identical to what we have done in the laboratory. So, you may dismiss that as a coincidence if you're insane. You know what I mean? So my suspicion has always been that the Templars were successful at alchemy. And that's how they got, all of the rulers of Europe in debt to them. You know, it really doesn't make any sense that they came up with, and yeah, they created banks, and, you know, people, when I bring this up, they always give this history, and it's like, okay, go start a bank. You know what I mean? That doesn't explain anything. So, interesting possibility that the Templars were successful at alchemy. And I guess we'll talk a little bit about the book here. I actually discovered this book because I had this feeling that Freemasonry contained knowledge that I wanted to have. You know, I just had this intuitive feeling that I knew what the secrets were, and I wanted confirmation. So I was looking for this book, Morals and Dogma, and it was supposed to be secret. It has a stamp in the front that says to be returned to lodge upon death or withdrawal of recipient. So I think what happened is, widows died, and they just donated the books to used bookstores, and so now, you can buy it on Amazon. But this, I found this copy 15 years ago or more, before it was commonly available, and so I didn't have the option of ordering it off of Amazon. And I dreamed that it was on the bookshelf at the local used bookstore. And I woke up and I told my girlfriend, you know that book that I want? It's at the bookstore. And I only did that because I wanted a witness for my own sanity. There was a lot of this kind of thing going on at the time. We go down to the bookstore and it's exactly where it was in the dream on the bookshelf. So there is a tremendous amount of knowledge in this book. Really, Freemasonry, at least as it originally was intended, is like a compendium of wisdom and knowledge gathered from different cultures and adepts, the Eleusinian mysteries, the Pythagorean school, anything that is really useful and powerful and true is sort of added and compiled into this compendium, So these days, I think the fraternity has been hijacked. And I'm going to explain how that happened, actually, to set this up. The stream I'm doing about Hermes and the Corpus Hermeticum, I was doing a little bit of research last night, and I started comparing Gnosticism to hermeticism because they're strikingly similar. And I realized that Gnosticism was basically a more paranoid version of hermeticism, right? In the hermetic body, for example, the governors, the 7 governors, are not evil. They're not against mankind. They have a role in regulating the fate and destiny and exerting an influence, but it's a neutral influence. It's more something like gravity. They're not this hostile force like the archons in the Gnostic tradition. And so in the course of reading through this Masonic tome here, I came across this bit of information. According to Albert Pike, the pharaohs realized that the mysteries illuminated people, and that illuminated people could not be subjugated. They don't need to be ruled, and they know they don't need to be ruled. So they set about to dismantle the mysteries, and that's why they introduced the monotheistic religion, right? So around this time, Pythagoras and I think it was Euripides, but primarily Pythagoras is the important one. They had come to Egypt, and they had taken initiation in the mysteries and brought them back to Greece. So eventually, the Eleusinian mysteries in Rome caused the same reaction from the authorities. The Roman consulate realized this is a problem for us. We cannot have people becoming illuminated. They will not accept the religions that we want to force down their throats. You know what I mean? It's not good. So 3rd century, they banned the mysteries there. Aristotle said of this, without the mysteries, humanity is lost. They went underground, preserved them. But the specific action that the Roman consulate took was to send a certain type of magistrate called an archon into the mysteries with the purpose of subverting them and stealing the secrets, basically. So get it? The archons of the Gnostic belief were actually people. And that paranoia about the, archons and that evil came from the direct experience of this persecution, right? And so it's something that really persists as a problem to this day. For example, I've considered changing my name, the name of this channel, because I didn't really realize when I created it that people associate Gnosticism, the word Gnostic, with Christianity, And so there's like a religious undertone. People have told me, you might want to change the name because it kind of implies something religious. To me, it just means knowledge of light, the luminostic, But it's yet another way that Christianity has kind of, what's it called when the cop says, give me your car? Commandeered. They commandeered the mysteries, corrupted them, weakened them, and kind of transformed them from a tool for liberation into a tool for subjugation, right? It's one of the most evil tricks that anyone has ever foisted upon humanity. How would they transmute mercury to gold without a nuclear reactor? It's just an electric charge, I guess. The details actually in depth are in one of my videos. I did a debunk of Billy Carson. Was it Billy Carson and Professor Dave simultaneously? Because Professor Dave did a debunk of Carson, but a lot of the things Professor Dave said were completely wrong. So I made a video that goes through this stuff. And so if you find that video, exactly how they transmute the mercury into, mercury into gold is described there. So back to the Templars, the connection between hermetic knowledge and the Templars is not something that's really overtly discussed by people, but alchemy is generally attributed to having come from Hermes Trismegistus. Also, the secrecy is indicative of this hermetic tradition. And another interesting possibility, I guess, Baphomet, and I know a lot of people say Baphomet, but the T in French at the end of a word is silent, so it's Baphomet. Baphomet, the depiction that we all know of the as above, so below, androgynous goat demon-looking thing is really just a glyph of nature. There's nothing evil about it. It says solvet coagula, usually somewhere on the throne. But another way that this kind of connects into the mysteries is that Baphomet is actually a cipher. And there is a type of gematria called timera, where, there's a bunch of different types of gematria, but it's a way of rearranging the letters based on a cipher. And when you apply this cipher to Baphomet, you get Sophia, wisdom, right? So the fact that we had this cipher that is decoded using gematria, these are all indications that this association with the hermetic knowledge and these secrets of alchemy and gematria and on and on is valid. So what was I going to say about the number 13? Well, let's skip that. So the Templars, because I don't have a ton of time, and I definitely want to get to this book, because I'm trying to offer something that people might not be really aware of. So one of the benefits of Morals and Dogma, and by the way, we have been going through this book, certain degrees, in my Patreon for years now, and there is a tremendous wealth of insights and hidden histories, all sorts of mysteries that have plagued me for decades were resolved by a lot of the information in this book. So join my Patreon if you're interested in that kind of thing. We're also going into all sorts of other related topics, shamanism, analysis of various occult works and whatnot. So, I'm trying to find where he starts with the Templars. Okay, so the Night Kadosh. A 100 years ago, it became known that there were Templars under a veil, and therefore the degree was prescribed, and ceasing to be worked became a more brief and formal ceremony. This is degree 30, the Night Kadosh that he's talking about. And already you see something interesting here, because the Masons have always claimed that there's no connections with the Templars. That's clearly untrue. Jacques de Molay, the leader of the Templars, was burned at the stake. The Freemasons Youth Club is called the Order of de Molay. And another interesting aspect of this, and this also answers a question that was in the chat, my association with Freemasonry formally and how that started is kind of related to this thing of the Freemasons kind of denying what they really are, you know. The first time I caught them and I knew that I was correct about this, Bob Weir from the Grateful Dead had a club in Marin called Sweetwater. I think it's still there. And upstairs, there's a Masonic Lodge, the local Marin Masonic Lodge. Marin is one of the wealthiest places in the United States. So those are some powerful Masons at this particular lodge. And so the LSD chemist that had made the Grateful Dead sound system and paid their bills for the first few years had died in Australia. And it's a crazy story because he went down there because he thought there was going to be a pole shift and he didn't want to drown. He ended up flipping over upside down, right, pole shift in microcosm, and drowning in a puddle. So the whole thing of trying to avoid flipping over and drowning, it still happened to him. So anyways, it was a wake for Owsley, and they had it in the Masonic temple upstairs. So after the little concert and the drinks and whatnot, everyone went upstairs to the temple room, and it was an absurd scene. There's like day glow. They were trying to simulate like the acid test kind of environment from back in the day. And I looked, and there was a bookshelf. And I went over to the bookshelf, and they're all occult works. And the Masons formally say we are not an occult organization. So I saw in the temple with my own eyes that that wasn't true. And I guess maybe a year later, I went to the Ukiah Lodge, and they have a dinner every Friday. So if you want to become a Mason, that's usually what they do. They have like public dinners, and you can come and they kind of vet you to see if you're going to fly. So I can't remember exactly how this transpired because I didn't go to the dinner first. I think I must have written down the phone number and called, and instead of going to the dinner, the lodge master, who was a 32nd degree retired cop, invited me to lunch. So I went to lunch with him, and I started asking him questions, and one of the questions was, for example, you guys say it's not an occult organization, but I'm pretty positive that that's not true. And his answer was, everything's occult, isn't it? Which was really good. And at the time, I was a outlaw pot grower. I look just like I do now. I'm a felon, just a drug charge, but I'm still a felon. So I thought there's no way that they're going to formally accept me. And this guy's a retired cop, right? And he asked me, do you have a criminal record? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, don't worry about it, so do I. And we had talked quite a lot at this point, but that blew my mind too. I'm like, wait a minute. A retired cop that's a felon and also a 32nd degree Freemason? What is going on? So go down to the lodge, and I have the dinner, and he says, when I get there, we have, this other brother will sign off on your paper, and I wasn't real sure about it, though, because they were all like Christian kind of redneck business kind of, I don't know, it wasn't my scene. But I liked him, the 32nd degree. It turned out all the rest of them were third degree, because it's true that up in, third degree Master Mason, after that, you start to actually learn things. And below that, you think it's just a Christian civic organization. So at any rate, I cornered this, the lodge master, over by this like case of artifacts they had in the back. Not really artifacts, but like Masonic, I don't know, relics, whatever. And I started, talking, and I'm like, look, this is what I figured out, and blah, I'm going on and on and on and on and on. And he says, he stops me, And he goes, you know more about this than any of these men in here. And then he looked at my girlfriend who was standing there, and he said, a Mason cannot ask another man to become a Mason, but you can. So he was actually like encouraging my girlfriend to pressure me because he can't do it directly. The only reason I'm really telling you that is because, you know, it sort of validates the intuition that I had, that I understood what this stuff was. And that was confirmed by this Mason. And so I ended up taking initiation, but then my mom called and acted like there was an emergency, and I went to South America, and she ended up committing suicide. I never went back to the United States, so you know, I know we were kind of going off topic, but someone asked. Yeah, and that's the whole Masonic story for me. Point being that they do misrepresent themselves. It's not a malicious thing, though. You know, people think that they're like a satanic, baby-eating Luciferian group, and there are subsects, I think, that are dark. The Black Brothers, the Left-Hand Path Lodges. But generally, it's actually just hermetic, and there's nothing sinister about it. At any rate, though, this will give us some insight also into the true nature of the Templars. And so, from the tomb in which after his murders he rotted, Clement V howls against the successors of his victims in the allocution of Pio IX against the Freemasons. The ghosts of the dead Templars haunt the Vatican and disturb the slumbers of the paralyzed papacy, which, dreading the dead, shrieks out its excommunications and impotent anathemas against the living. Anathemas against the living. It is a declaration of war, and was needed to arouse apathy and inertness to action. An enemy of the Templars shall tell us the secret of this papal hostility against an order that has existed for centuries in despite of its anathemas, and has its sanctuaries and its asyla even in Rome. It will be easy as we read to separate the false from the true, the audacious conjectures from the simple facts. A power that ruled without antagonism and without concurrence, and consequently without control, proved fatal to the sacerdotal royalties, while the republics, on the other hand, had perished by the conflict of liberties and franchises. Sound familiar? History is just a repeating pattern, which, in the absence of all duty hierarchically, God damn it, you guys know what I'm trying to say, sanctioned and enforced, had soon become mere tyrannies, rivals one of the other. To find a stable medium between these two abysses, the idea of the Christian hierophants was to create a society devoted by abnegation, by solemn vows, protected by severe rules and regulations, which should be recruited by initiation, and which, sole depository of the great religious and social secrets, should make kings and pontiffs without exposing it to the corruptions of power. In that was the secret of that kingdom of Jesus Christ, which, without being of this world, would govern all of its grandeurs. The idea presided at the foundation of the great religious orders, so often at war with the secular authorities, ecclesiastical or civil. Its realization was also the dream of the dissident sects of Gnostics and the Illuminati, who pretended to connect their faith with the primitive tradition of the Christianity of St. John. It at length became a menace for the church and society when a rich and dissolute order, initiated in the mysterious doctrines of the Kabbalah, seemed disposed to turn against legitimate authority, the conservative principle of hierarchy, and threatened the entire world with an immense revolution. Now, this is one of those things that, you know, people have written me off, and, you know, I've caught hell for it. But the Illuminati are not the enemy. What if there is some weird satanic cult in Hollywood that is, you know, and there's a cult of evil rulers on this planet? That's not the Illuminati. They have demonized the Illuminati in order to discourage people from finding the truth. What he was describing about how the Templars and the Illuminati were really trying to find a way to not rule, but to allow wisdom, uncorrupted and guided by the deep truths, knowledge, and wisdom of nature, and the light of illumination, to somehow make that the law of the world. It's true that the leader of the Illuminati wanted to get rid of religion, and he wanted to get rid of nations, but only because religion is all distortions of this original current of truth and wisdom. And it is built upon the martyrs, really, like Jacques de Molay, and the bones of Hermes. And the real objective of the Illuminati was to subvert the banking and educational systems and to teach illumination to mankind. And this is not doctrine and dogma. This is a method of teaching people to be able to learn, to read the book of nature, the allegories of the book of nature, and to catalyze processes internally that lead to illumination. That was the real goal, and that is why you have been taught that they are your enemy. Go read Adam Weisshaupt papers. They're online. No one here would take issue with anything that he said. And, he said they pretended to be Christian and whatnot. You'll notice that sometimes he'll mention Christ and stuff, like kind of in passing, because he has to put on this facade in order to get into the lodges and then fix the problem that we have with the Black Brothers. The Templars, whose history is so imperfectly known, were those terrible conspirators. In 1118, 9 Knights Crusaders in the East, among whom were Geoffroy de Saint-Omer and Hugh de Payens, I guess I'm probably not saying his name right, consecrated themselves to religion and took an oath between the hands of the Patriarch of Constantinople, a see always secretly or openly hostile to Rome from the time of Plotinus. The avowed object of the Templars was to protect the Christians who came to visit holy places. Their secret object was rebuilding the Temple of Solomon on the model prophesied by Ezekiel. This rebuilding, formerly predicted by the Judaic, mysteries of the earlier ages, had become the secret dream of the patriarchs of the Orient. The Temple of Solomon, rebuilt and consecrated to the Catholic worship, would become in effect the metropolis of the universe. The East would prevail over the West, and the patriarchs of Constantinople would possess themselves of the papal power of Rome. The Templars, or poor fellow soldiery of the holy house of the temple, intended to be rebuilt, took as their models in the Bible the warrior masons of Zorobabel, who worked holding the sword in one hand and a trowel in the other. Therefore it was that the sword and the trowel were the insignia of the Templars, who subsequently, as will be seen, concealed themselves under the name of Brethren Masons. This name, Frères Maçons in the French, probably Frères Maçons, I have no idea, I don't speak French at all, adopted by way of secret reference to the builders of the Second Temple, was corrupted in English into Freemasons, as Pythagore de Crotone was into Peter Gower of Groton in England, or Karum, a name misrendered into Hiram. From an artificer in brass and other metals, became the chief builder of the Heikel Kadesh, the holy house of the Temple of Solomon. And the words Banai and Banaim yet appear in the Masonic degrees as secret words, as you now know as an initiate, meaning builder and builders. The trowel of the Templars is quadruple, and the triangle plates of it are arranged in the form of a cross, making the Kabbalistic pantacle known by the name of the Cross of the East, the Knight of the East and the Knight of the East and West, having their titles secret allusions to the Templars, of whom they were at first the successors. The secret thought of Hugh de Payens in founding his order was not exactly to serve the ambition of the patriarchs of Constantinople. There existed at that period in the East a sect of Johannite Christians who claimed to be the only true initiates into the real mysteries of the religion of the Savior. They pretended to know the real history of Jesus, the Anointed, and adopted in part the Jewish traditions and the tales of the Talmud. They held that the facts recounted in the Evangels are but allegories and not literal truths, the key of which St. John gives in saying that the world might be filled with the books that could be written upon the words and deeds of Jesus Christ, words which they thought would be only a ridiculous exaggeration if he were not speaking in allegory. The distortions of this have been varied and prolonged to infinity. The Johannites ascribed to St. John the foundation of their secret church, and the Grand Pontiffs and the sect assumed the title of Christos, anointed or consecrated, and claimed to have succeeded one another from St. John by an uninterrupted succession of pontifical powers. He who, at the period of the foundation of the order of the temple, claimed these imaginary prerogatives was named Theoclit. He knew Hugh, he initiated him into the mysteries and hopes of his pretended church. He seduced him by the notions of sovereign priesthood and supreme royalty, and finally designated him as his successor. Thus, the order of the Knights of the Temple was at its very origin devoted to the cause of opposition to the tiara of Rome and the crowns of kings, and the apostolate of Kabbalistic Gnosticism was vested in its chiefs. For St. John himself was the father of the Gnostics, and the current translation of his polemic against the heretical of his sect and the pagans who denied Christ was the Word is throughout a misrepresentation or misunderstanding of the whole spirit of the Evangel. The tendencies and tenets of the order were enveloped in profound mystery, and it externally professed the most perfect orthodoxy. The chiefs alone knew the aim of the order. The subalterns followed them without distrust. These chiefs that he's referencing are also still referred to by occultists like Aleister Crowley. I mean, obviously, he's not still referring to anyone, he's dead. But these secret chiefs are hidden governors, something like the governors of the hermeticism or the archons of Gnosticism, except that they may actually be physical people with physical bodies that represent different lineages, different currents of initiation, and they are said to have a lot of influence over the evolution of mankind and our destiny. To acquire influence and wealth, then to intrigue, and at need to fight, to establish the Johannite or Gnostic and Kabbalistic dogma were the objects and means proposed to the initiated brethren. The papacy and the rival monarchies, they said to them, are sold and bought in these days. They are corrupt, and tomorrow perhaps and hopefully will destroy each other. All that will become the heritage of the temple. The world will soon come to us for its sovereigns and pontiffs. We shall constitute the equilibrium of the universe and be rulers over the masters of the world. And so what they're saying there is that, they're like, we are not corruptible. We have achieved illumination, and these rulers are going to destroy each other. All we have to do is get out of the way and wait for them to do it. This is one of the arguments against hostile alien races, that, we are both good and bad humans, and we're not going to make it off the planet if we don't change. So, a truly evil race of people would do each other in, and they would never make it off their planet. The Templars, like all other secret orders and associations, had two doctrines, one concealed and reserved for the masters, which was Johannism, and the other public, which was Roman Catholic. Thus they deceived the adversaries whom they sought to supplant. Hence Freemasonry, vulgarly imagined to have begun with the Dionysian architects or the German stoneworkers, adopted St. John the Evangelist as one of its patrons, associating with him in order not to arouse the suspicions of Rome, St. John the Baptist, and thus covertly proclaiming itself the chief of the Kabbalah and Essenism together. So let me check in with the chat. I see there's kind of a lot. Yeah, the guitar is happening tomorrow. I will play plenty tomorrow. My last name, Temple, is from Templar. Nice. Okay, let's see the other chat. Yeah, so far this is wild. It's really wild to see this being read publicly, really. I mean, anyways, for the Johannism of the adepts was the Kabbalah of the early Gnostics, degenerating afterward into those heretical forms which Gnosticism eventually developed, so that even Mainz had his followers among them. Many adopted his doctrines of the two principles, the recollection of which is perpetuated by the handle of the dagger and the tessellated pavement or floor of the lodge, stupidly called the indented tessel, and represented by great hanging tassels, when it really means a tesserated floor, from the Latin tessera, of white and black lozenges, with a necessarily denticulated or indented border or edging. And wherever, in the higher degrees, the two colors, white and black, are in juxtaposition, the two principles of Zoroaster and Mainz are alluded to. With others, the doctrine became a mystic pantheism, descended from that of the Brahmins, and even pushed to an idolatry of nature and hatred of every revealed dogma. The symbolism of the black and white tiles in the Masonic lodges is actually deeper than people realize, I think. You know, the obvious thing of like the interaction of duality, the dark and light, good and evil, that whole thing. But in the real process of initiation and like the Eleusinian mysteries and the mysteries of Isis and these, you know, older schools, the initiate was pushed through a series of experiences that were so terrifying, the dark aspect of it, that it is said that they often died. And the light was, you know, psychedelic beverages and orgies, and, you know, so they were brought through these absolute extremes, because the truth is that illumination is not just, you know, huffing unicorn farts and blowing lines of fairy dust. It's knowledge of the full spectrum of light and darkness, you know, to see the universe through the ultimate, from the ultimate perspective. And the trick is, there's a great line in a Tool song. I think it's the Fibonacci one. I can't remember the name of it right now, but he says, to ride the spiral of our divinity and still be a human, right? So you have to be able to compartmentalize and view things from the point of view of a God objectively, but then also, you know, remember your place and your role and your position as a human. And that's kind of what this process was really about. And that's what the tiles actually represent. To all this, the absurd reading of the established church, taking literally the figurative, allegorical, and mythical language of a collection of Oriental books of different ages, directly and inevitably led. The same result long after followed the folly of regarding the Hebrew books as if they had been written by the unimaginative, hard, practical intellect of the England of James I and the bigoted stolidity of Scottish Presbyterianism. What he's saying there is that there is a degradation that has happened through the translations of these ancient and holy books. And that was kind of a swipe at the King James version of the Bible. The better to succeed and win partisans, the Templars sympathized with regrets for dethroned creeds and encouraged the hopes of new worships, promising to all liberty of conscience and a new orthodoxy that should be the synthesis of all of these persecuted creeds, a synthesis of all of the knowledge that has been collected throughout history by all the cultures of the world. It is absurd to suppose that men of intellect adored a monstrous idol called Baphomet or recognized Muhammad as an inspired prophet. Their symbolism, invented ages before to conceal what it was dangerous to avow, was of course misunderstood by those who are not adepts, and to their enemies seemed to be pantheistic. The calf of gold made by Aaron for the Israelites, but was one of the oxen under the laver of bronze, and the cherubim of the propitiatory misunderstood. The symbols of the wise always become the idols of the ignorant. The symbols of the wise always become the idols of the ignorant. What the chiefs of the order really believed and taught is indicated by the adepts, by hints contained in high degrees of Freemasonry, and by the symbols which only the adepts understand. The blue degrees are but the outer court or portico of the temple. Part of the symbols are displayed there to the initiate, but he is intentionally misled by false interpretations. It is not intended that he shall understand them, but it is intended that he shall imagine he understands them. Their true explication is reserved for the adepts, the princes of masonry. The whole body of the royal and sacerdotal art was hidden so carefully centuries since in the high degrees as that it is even yet impossible to solve many of the enigmas which they contain. It is well enough for the mass for those called Masons to imagine that all is contained in the blue degrees, and whoso attempts to undeceive them will labor in vain. Without any true reward violate his obligations to secrecy as an adept. Masonry is the Sphinx, buried to the head in the sands heaped around it by the ages. And what he's saying there partly is that, in the Kabbalion it says the lips of wisdom are closed, but to the ears of understanding. And we have that term hermetically sealed, right? Like it's so secret, nothing can escape. That is because you cannot explain this stuff to people. There are processes, there is experience, there is real gnosis that has to occur in order for people to be able to understand these things. And so he's saying, even if the adepts that knew tried to tell the lower degrees or the profane without having them go through this initiatory process, they wouldn't be able to understand anyways, so you would just be breaking your oath for nothing, That's why Aleister Crowley published the key to the entire symbolism of high degree Freemasonry in the Book of Lies in chapter 69, the way to suck seed and the way to suck eggs. That's a hint, actually. But the reason that he didn't really get in any trouble is exactly that, The two 33rd degree Masons came to his house, knocked on the door, and they're like, "What the hell is this?" And he's like, "I haven't taken your oath," which is crazy too. He figured it out without actually even being initiated. So apparently there are exceptions to this whole rule. There's always an exception to the rule. But you guys see what I'm saying here, The seeds of decay were sown in the order of the temple at its origin. Hypocrisy is a mortal disease. It had conceived a great work, which it was incapable of executing, because it knew neither humility nor personal abnegation, because Rome was then invincible, and because the later chiefs of the order did not comprehend its mission. Moreover, the Templars were in general uneducated and capable only of wielding a sword, with no qualifications for governing, and at need enchaining that queen of the world called opinion. The doctrines of the chiefs would, if expounded to the masses, have seemed to them the babblings of folly. The symbols of the wise are the idols of the vulgar, or else as meaningless as the hieroglyphics of Egypt to the nomadic Arabs. There must always be a commonplace interpretation for the mass of initiates of the symbols that are eloquent to the adepts. And so what he just mentioned about how, if the adepts were to go to the masses and say, all the knowledge, the true wisdom, they would just, they can't process it, they don't understand, they'll ridicule you. And last Hermetic stream, part 4, the first thing that we read was Hermes, or the Dragon of Light, the Poimander, telling Hermes, do not speak to the masses, because I would not have the jealousy and ridicule. They'll be jealous and they'll ridicule you. So just keep your mouth shut. Don't even bother. And I remember in my own life, telling an economics major that they could fix the economic system by applying the laws of physics, because that's what you learn from this knowledge, basically that the same laws govern everything. And, I couldn't tell him how to do that in terms of equations and exactly, but he laughed in my face and called me an idiot. And now 2015 emerged econophysics, which is, you know what I mean? So it's not that this stuff is untrue. It's not ridiculous. It's actually real wisdom. But it is true, too, that they will laugh in your face, People will laugh in your face. Like, even as a child, I noticed that Lamarck was at least partly right. Nature obviously knows something is looking, right? But when I would talk to people about this and say, I don't think blind random mutations really explain everything, they would call me an idiot and tell me I just don't understand evolution. Now we call the integrated Lamarckism epigenetics, right? So, again, it's just crazy how nothing changes. The Corpus Hermeticum was written in 2 AD and is probably much older than that. And even then, they were talking about how, he wrote in there that don't say this stuff to the profane because they're just going to laugh at you and hate you. In Africa, too, there's this ancient parable or whatever, a saying that he who speaks the truth has few friends, It's just a really wild thing to see how little changes from culture to culture and century to century. And that is why Jacques Desmoulins and Adam Weishaupt from the Illuminati and several other people, Aleister Crowley as well, were trying to find a way to disseminate this knowledge on a mass scale across the planet to try to put a stop to this bullshit because, the lack of understanding is the major contributor to all of the wasted human potential, and there's so much suffering that could be avoided if we did not allow superstitions and distortions of the hermetic knowledge in the form of institutionalized religions and misguided political systems to fucking run amok and turn what should be a planet coming into homeostasis, a race of beings coming into homeostasis, into a fucking dissonance chamber, So, hypocrisy is a mortal disease. That's a good line. So Hugh de Payen himself had not that keen and far-sighted intellect, nor that grandeur of purpose which afterward distinguished the military founder of another soldiery that became formidable to kings. The Templars were unintelligent and therefore unsuccessful Jesuits. Their watchword was to become wealthy in order to buy the world. They became so, and in 1312 they possessed in Europe alone more than 9,000 seigneuries. Riches were the shoal on which they were wrecked. They became insolent and unwisely showed their contempt for the religious and social institutions which they had aimed to overthrow. Their ambition was fatal to them. Their projects were divined and prevented. Rome, more intolerant of heresy than of vice and crime, came to fear the order, and fear is always cruel. It has always deemed philosophical truth the most dangerous of heresies, and has never been at a loss for a false accusation, by means of which to crush free thought. Pope Clement V and King Phillip le Bel gave the signal to Europe, and the Templars, taken as it were in an immense net, were arrested, disarmed, and cast into prison. Never was a coup d'etat accomplished with a more formidable concert of action. The whole world was struck with stupor and eagerly waited for the strange revelations of a process that was to echo through so many ages. So what he's saying is that they did have this knowledge at one point, but maybe their success in alchemy, but eventually they didn't exactly become corrupted, but they became distracted and they became lost, and it became more about the wealth. The original objective was to accumulate the wealth in order to use it to dethrone the Vatican and, the European overlords and whatnot. And that they kind of got derailed in that process. And they didn't act swiftly and with enough concision. And so there was time for their plans to be divined and curtailed. It was impossible to unfold to the people the conspiracy of the Templars against the thrones and the crown, the tiara, meaning the Vatican. It was impossible to expose to them the doctrines of the chiefs of the order. This would have been to initiate the multitude into the secrets of the masters, and to have uplifted the veil of Isis before the entire world. Recourse was therefore had to the charge of magic, and denouncers and false witnesses were easily found. When the temporal and spiritual tyrannies unite to crush a victim, they never want for serviceable instruments. The Templars were gravely accused of spitting upon Christ and denying God at their receptions, of gross obscenities, conversations with female devils, the androgynous breasted Baphomet, and the worship of a monstrous idol. The end of the drama is well known, and how Jacques de Molay and his fellows perished in the flames. But before his execution, the chief of the doomed order organized and instituted what afterward came to be called the occult, hermetic, or Scottish Masonry. In the gloom of his prison, the Grand Master created 4 metropolitan lodges at Naples for the east, at Edinburgh for the west, Stockholm in the north, and at Paris for the south. The initials of his name, ABM, found in the same order in the first 3 degrees, are but one of the many internal and cogent proofs that such was the origin of modern Freemasonry. The legend of Osiris was revived and adopted to symbolize the destruction of the order and the resurrection of Kurum, slain in the body of the temple of Kurum Abai, the master, as the martyr of fidelity to obligation, of truth and conscience, prophesied the restoration to life of the buried association. The Pope and King soon after perished in a strange and sudden manner. Squin de Florian, the chief denouncer of the order, died assassinated. In breaking the sword of the Templars, they made it into a poignard, and their prescribed trowels thenceforth built only tombs. The order disappeared at once. Its estates and wealth were confiscated, and it seemed to have ceased to exist. Nevertheless, it lived under other names and governed by unknown secret chiefs, revealing itself only to those who, in passing through a series of degrees, had proven themselves worthy to be entrusted with the dangerous secrets. The modern orders that style themselves Templars have assumed a name to which they have not the shadow of a title. The successors of the ancient adepts of the Rosy Cross, abandoning by degrees the austere and hierarchical science of their ancestors in initiation, became a mystical sect, united with many of the Templars, the dogma of the two intermingling, and believed themselves to be the sole depositories of the secrets of the Gospel of St. John, seeing in its recitals an allegorical series of rites proper to complete the initiation. You know what? I think we're going to have to do a part 2 because oh no, wait. We just have, okay, actually we're almost done. Let's do it. Let's get through. Okay, Rosy Cross, Gospel St. John. And the initiates, in fact, thought in the 18th century that their time had arrived. Some to found a new hierarchy, others to overturn all authority, and to press down all the summits of the social order under the level of equality. The mystical meanings of the rose as a symbol are to be looked for in the Kabbalistic commentaries on the Canticles. The rose was, for the initiates, the living and blooming symbol of the revelation of the harmonies of being. It was the emblem of beauty, life, love, and pleasure. Flammel, or the book of the Jew Abraham, made it the hieroglyphical sign of the accomplishment of the great work. Such is the key of the Roman de la Rose. The conquest of the rose was the problem propounded to science by initiation. While religion was laboring to prepare and establish the universal triumph, exclusive and definitive of the cross, to unite the rose and the cross was the problem proposed by the high initiation. And in fact, the occult philosophy being the universal symbols, the universal synthesis, the occult philosophy being the universal synthesis ought to explain all the phenomena of being. Religion, considered solely as a physiological fact, is the revelation and satisfaction of a necessity of souls. Its existence is a scientific fact. To deny it would be to deny humanity itself. The Rosicroix adepts respected the dominant hierarchical and revealed religion. Consequently, they could no more be the enemies of the papacy than of legitimate monarchy. And if they conspired against popes and kings, it was because they considered them personally as apostates from duty and supreme favorers of anarchy. What, in fact, is a despot, spiritual or temporal, but a crowned anarchist? One of the magnificent pantacles that express the esoteric and unutterable part of science is the rose of light, in the center of which a human form extends its arms in the form of a cross. Commentaries and studies have been multiplied upon the Divine Comedy, the work of Dante, and yet no one, as far as we know, has pointed out its special character. The work of the great Ghibellin is a declaration of a war against the papacy by bold revelations of the mysteries. The Epic of Dante is Johannite and Gnostic, an audacious application like that of the Apocalypse, of the figures and numbers of the Kabbalah to the Christian dogmas, and a secret negation of everything absolute in these dogmas. His journey through the supernatural worlds is accomplished like the initiate into the mysteries of Eleusis. He escapes from that gulf of hell over the gate of which the sentence of despair was written by reversing the positions of his head and feet, that is to say, by accepting the direct opposite of the Catholic dogma. And then he reascends to the light by using the devil himself as a monstrous ladder. Faust ascends to heaven by stepping on the head of the vanquished Mephistopheles. Hell is impassable for those only who know not how to turn back from it. We free ourselves from its bondage by audacity. His hell is but a negative purgatory. His heaven is composed of a series of Kabbalistic circles divided by a cross, like the Pantacle of Ezekiel. In the center of this cross blooms a rose, and we see the symbol of the adepts of the Rosicroix, the rose cross, for the first time publicly expounded and almost categorically explained. For the first time, because Guillaume de Lory, who died in 1260, 5 years before the birth of Alighieri, had not completed his Roman de la Rose, which was continued by Chopinel a half-century afterward. One is astonished to discover that the Roman de la Rose and the Divina Commedia are two opposite forms of one and the same work. Initiation into independence of spirit, a satire on all contemporary institutions, and the allegorical formula of the great secrets of the Society of the Rosy Cross. This is the last page. The important manifestations of occultism coincide with the period of the fall of the Templars. Since Jean de Meung, or Chopinal, contemporary of the old age of Dante, flourished during the best years of his life at the court of Philippe de Belle, the Roman de la Rose is the epic of old France. It is a profound book, under the form of levity, a revelation as learned as that of Apuleius of the mysteries of occultism. The rose of flannel, that of Jean de Meung, and that of Dante grew on the same stem. Swedenborg's system was nothing else but the Kabbalah, minus the principle of the hierarchy. It is the temple without the keystone and the foundation. Count Cagliostro, who is one of the people that Aleister Crowley claimed to be a reincarnation of, he said one of the most brilliant things that I've ever heard in my life. It's sorry, that's not Cagliostro. That was the Comte de Phoenix. Still, it fits here. The paradox of the Comte de Phoenix was, the absolute rule of the state shall be a function of the absolute liberty of the individual will. And, that sounds paradoxical, but that's what they were after. That's what we're still after. It's what adepts and initiates, that's what we're still trying to do. It is. And what it means is that there is no law, there's no doctrine, there is no religious commandment that is going to make people act right. True gnosis, illumination, internal processes, internal change, internal transmutation, is the only way to bring people in line. And it is not until then that people will follow rules exactly, you know? So the state, in a sense, is sort of an imaginary entity. The absolute rule of the state can and or shall be and only in I modified it, but it's the absolute rule of the state shall be a function of the absolute liberty of the individual will. But that's not Cagliostro. I'm sorry, I got the wrong incarnation there. Cagliostro was an agent of the Templars and therefore wrote to the Freemasons of London that the time had come to begin the work of rebuilding the Temple of the Eternal. He had introduced into Masonry a new rite called the Egyptian and endeavored to resuscitate the mysterious worship of Isis. The 3 letters LPD on his seal were the initials of the words Lilia Pedibus Destroy, tread underfoot the lilies of France. And a Masonic medal of the 16th or 17th century has upon it a sword cutting off the stalk of the lily and the words Talem dabit ultio messum, such harvest revenge will give. A lodge inaugurated under the auspices of Rousseau, the fanatic of Geneva, became the center of the revolutionary movement in France, and a prince of the blood royal went thither to swear the destruction of the successors of Philip de Bell, who destroyed Jacques de Molay. The registers of the Order of Templars attest that the regent, the Duc d'Orléans, was Grand Master of that formidable secret society, and that his successors were the Duc de Maine, the Prince of Bourbon, Condé, and the Duc de Cossé-Brissac. The Templars compromitted the king. They saved him from the rage of the people to exasperate that rage and bring on the catastrophe prepared by the centuries. It was a scaffold that the vengeance of the Templars demanded. The secret movers of the French Revolution had sworn to overturn the throne and the altar upon the tomb of Jacques de Molay. When Louis XVI was executed, half the work was done, and thenceforward the army of the Temple was to direct all of its efforts against the Pope. Jacques de Molay and his companions were perhaps martyrs, but their avengers dishonored their memory. Royalty was generated on the scaffold of Louis XVI. The church triumphed in the captivity of Pius VI, carried a prisoner to Valence, and dying of fatigue and sorrow, but the successors of the ancient Knights of the Temple perished, overwhelmed in their fatal victory. Damn. So for those of you that might just be tuning in, that was from this. This is actually an 1851 copy, too. It's a first edition. It's seen better days. I've been carrying it around the world with me for almost 20 years, I think. Okay, so let me check in with the chat real quick. And so that's the reality for all of you people that may have questioned conspiracy theories over the years. Like, you got to question the alternative narratives more than any of the other ones. So the demonization of the Freemasons and the Illuminati and the occult, all this hermeticism, all of it is just a way to keep you in bounds, The real goal is to see the great revolution prepared for by the ages, to see the great revolution prepared by the ages to march, which has for its aims the amelioration of mankind from servitude, slavery, ignorance, despotism, bigotry, and religion. And to reinstate the knowledge of the divine sovereignty of the individual will. That is the goal. Yeah, you can order this on Amazon for $50 or so, but I've got to get back to my other job, which is music. Tomorrow I'm going to drink psilocybin mushrooms and play music for many hours, partly to try to crowdfund some surgeries that I have to pay out of pocket for, 4 of them. So 2 hernia meshes failed and 2 periodontal cavities. And I'm choking on something and I don't have any water. So I'm out, guys. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe. Consider becoming a patron if you enjoyed this. There are years of us going through this book and analyzing it, and me offering commentary and all sorts of other things of value. And I also do consultations, so if you are interested in learning directly, I'm available for that. And thank you guys all so much for spending this time with me. I am demonetized, so please hit the like button, share, subscribe. Consider becoming a patron, and I will see hopefully all of you tomorrow. Cheers.